It's always beautiful when you read your friends' bios and then all of the great memories come up of their accomplishments. So I was just looking over our next guest, Vanessa Williams, and she is the head of the National Black Conference, Mayors Conference. And there are 600 black mayors in America and 32,000 people of color who are mayors around the world. And her job is to connect them all and to share the common problems and solutions and to create harmony amongst them as they move forward in uplifting our community. There are special problems and challenges that they face that they share and that they can solve together better than alone. And so she is the bridge builder amongst the black mayors around the world. And she's also a major part of connecting them to the African diaspora, where she is very connected to many of the presidents, prime ministers around the world, around Africa specifically. So that's our guest, Vanessa Williams. She has a lot to share with you, and I'm particularly interested in what she sees our inner cities looking like over the next 4 years with our new administration. I'm actually excited to hear whatever she says because she's always got she's a very opinionated person, to say the least. So this black woman is very strong and inspired. Let's see if we can get her on and talk to her. There she is. Well, hi, darling. I was just reading your bio, and it's pretty inspiring to me because I watched the whole thing go down. Like, I watched you become this powerhouse. And, you know, I knew it from the beginning, and you always held a prestigious role, even as a young girl. But I watched you evolve. And I want to share you with the world because the work you do is so special. And a lot of people in our community are visible as supportive of our community, and that's good. And some of us choose to be behind the scenes and do all this good work, and sometimes we don't get recognized. I don't mean me, I get way too much recognition, but I mean you. And so I just wanted to share you with the world, and maybe some of what you're doing can get a boost. People can see you and hear from you what you're doing. I have lots to ask you. Let me say, I already told them about the Black Mayors Association and your role. But can we begin there? Because that's how I got to know you, working with black mayors.
Sure, absolutely. Well, as you know, I am blessed to serve as the executive director and CEO of the Conference of Black Mayors. Our association is an association with a very, very rich history, and it really moves along with the history of African Americans and the plight that we've had here in the country, in the United States of America. The organization started out as the Southern Conference of Black Mayors. Many of the mayors came out of either the Kennedy administration or the Civil Rights Movement and decided after the brother of JFK, Bobby Kennedy, was assassinated, that they would go home and, as they would say in the campaign trail, they said a lot of them would tell the story how his campaign was sock it to him, Bobby. And so many of them came off of that campaign and said, well, we're going to sock it to him, Bobby, in remembrance of you and all that we've done by running for office. And so you had mayors in cities like Tuskegee, Alabama, and other cities throughout the South and Southern Carolina, that then became elected officials, and they formed an association called the Southern Conference of Black Mayors. And it was in 1974 that the organization began to have mayors to become elected in cities like Los Angeles and Chicago and other areas that were outside of the actual Southern crest. And these mayors then in turn came into the fold of the organization, and they reincorporated as the then National Conference of Black Mayors. But it was in 2004 that I came on board as the executive director. I came behind the illustrious Michelle Karuma, who served in the seat for 30 years and retired. And when I came on board of the organization, a lot of the thought of the organization was how do we revive the organization and look at new ways of continuing the legacy of the organization. And it was at that time, because I had done a lot of work internationally, even as a younger woman then, I proposed to our board of directors, you have these 30 plus years of history of organizing and training mayors. How can we take what we're doing here, nationally and look at it from a global perspective. And it was in 2011 that the board of directors, after several conferences and meetings and organizing other conferences of mayors throughout the globe, that we incorporated the Conference of Black Mayors, that today represents a network of 32,000 mayors of African descent.
Could you repeat that? How many mayors?
32,000 mayors of African descent.
Wow, that's fantastic. I'm almost. So you represent 32,000 mayors, and you guys work as a unit in many cases, and you also share with each other a lot of the same trouble. People of color all over the world in underserved communities, almost always here in Indonesia and all around the world. I see the people of color being abused or being underserved in many ways. So you guys, you have worked a lot in Africa, I understand. And you have worked a lot with bringing this Black Mayors Association to Africa, the African diaspora, so that you can connect some dots. Will you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, I'd love to, Russell. Well, it started, Russell, believing, if I can be so transparent with you, we really came into a lot of these nations believing that we were there to help. We came in and said, okay, well, how can we as African Americans be of assistance and join hands and stand shoulder to shoulder with other elected officials across the globe? The first country that we actually went into was Haiti. We first organized the Haitian Conference of Leadership of Mayors, which now represents and is now 15 years strong, all the Haitian mayors. Then we went into the Republic of Colombia. And I have to say that, if you don't mind, before we speak about Africa.
No, please do, please.
Because we started, more so in North America and in the Caribbean and the CARICOM states. Jamaica, Haiti, all of the Republic of Colombia, Panama. We went into these kind of Honduras. We went into these countries and said, there are people that are of African descent that call themselves Afro-Latino or Afro-Caribbean, and how can we look at our similarities? And Russell, as you alluded to just a moment ago, no matter where you go around this globe, Black people are in the same conditions. We may speak different language, we may have a different dialect, we may have different cultural differences, but at the end of the day, when you look at the quality of life of Black and brown people across this globe, it's the same. And so that was the similarity that a lot of the mayors felt, and it touched them to see that they can go into the Republic of Colombia, where you have over 235 Afro-Colombian mayors, now representing a population of more than 32 million Afro-Colombian men and women and children. And you go into these type of countries and you see people that look just like you, but they may speak Spanish. Or when we went into Europe, that look just like you, but may speak French, or may speak Dutch, or may speak one of these other languages. But when you come around the commonality of a table and speak about what are the common threads that you share, those things are the same. And at the end of the day, every person wants their children to have a decent quality of life. And everyone wants water, they want good food, and they want safe communities and energy and environments that are sound. And so those common threads were things that we were able to organize our mayors around.
Wow, this is a lot. I thought we were going to talk primarily about America, but finding the common threads around the world is really a conversation that probably requires us to I can imagine the number of things that you've organized around. But before we because I do want to spend some of our time talking about the implications of our this next chapter in the American mayors, their challenges and some of the things, the announcements that have been made over the last. But could you just give me an example of something you aside from white supremacy, which is a big, right? That's on top of everything, right? The people who are here with me now, Indonesian young men and the darker people here are also exploited. It's not the Dutch, right, came here and messed everything, right? Okay. All over the world, white supremacy exists, and the colonization or exploitation of people of color, or even because of white supremacy, sometimes people of the same ethnic background, but our different colors oppress each other. Like in this case, based on, so it didn't have to be the Dutch. The Dutch taught them to oppress themselves. Right? That's the example. So it's the same everywhere. So under that umbrella, give me an example of something you might organize the mayors, international mayors around.
Clean water, energy, education, health disparities. Health disparities is one of the larger items in agriculture. Agriculture is something that is very much so important to mayors, not just here in the United States, but specifically internationally because of the importing of food and the quality of the food that's being imported. When you look at issues, as you said, if you're not focusing on colonialism or white supremacy in itself, but you're looking at some of the other common threads that are important, energy is a very important, climate change is very important. A lot of people are surprised when we speak about climate change and the effects that we have had on the overall environment. But when you look at countries, specifically when you look at a continent such as Africa, that has been so exploited, when you look at all the natural resources that are there on the continent of Africa, when you look at not just the human capital that has been exploited there, but also the natural things that come out the dirt. Those are issues that are very important to African-centered people. So these are issues that we've discussed. And then, of course, as you look at mayors and elected officials and them individually, what's important, things like good governance. And there was a level of training that you had to have on-the-job training. I think that a lot of mayors are the same way. Many of your elected officials, when you look at a mayor of a city, the mayor represents the community. It's the person that the community looks at and says, I want this to be our face. This is the individual that we're going to put trust in, that when they go out and represent our town, our city, our village, our parish, that this person will carry all of our sentiments with them. So that mayor,
Sorry, excuse me.
I always say to people, mayors are where the rubber meets the road. They're where the rubber meets the road.
So let me go back, because you said a few things that are, well, on the subject of environmental racism, or, people don't understand why you would say healthcare, why you would say education, why you would say, because it all goes back, again, to that umbrella. To make a choice to exploit a certain community, like everywhere in Africa, if there's something under the ground that's valuable, the people suffer. So everywhere, there's nowhere in Africa where they find something valuable where people don't end up with less just because that valuable thing exists, even if they never exploited that thing. That stuff that makes the cell phone destroys communities, and the farming and other things that were natural and that were part of the economics of communities. Diamonds, you take them out the ground, but then you destroy other things. Everywhere, oil, wherever they find valuable things, they've taken it from the people of color and let them starve, even though they are rich in natural resources. The richer they are, the poorer they are. In some ways, right? So I noticed that when I ran the Diamond Empowerment Fund through Africa, we found that the richer the country was in natural resource, the more the people were exploited and the more their poverty persists. So it's a mess, and it goes back again. I don't want to talk too much, but white supremacy. So you have to organize around all those issues. And I went back to the environmental racism, because when you say agriculture, when you say these things, people have to kind of connect the dots. So I want to ask you, because I know we only have an hour and you have so much to share. I could probably do 5 podcasts with what you're working on and what you've accomplished alone. But I want to ask you about some current events. We all organize, and with black people, I think, we all can agree that put Joe Biden and our sister in office. Right, and I think that there was an agenda that was a lot of it is being met pretty quickly. A lot of the things that we were promised, on the campaign trail, are being enacted through executive orders. Today, I saw, for instance, this is something that I know you'll have a lot to say about. I saw that they issued an executive order about the prison industrial complexes, something I fought my whole life against, and I was very happy about that. Do you have to shed some light on that?
Well, Russell, I think that when we look at the injustices that have taken place specifically within communities of color, when you look at the prison pipeline and what has happened within our community, I think that one of the things that our mayors continuously focus on is education. It has been proven that a lot of our neighborhoods and communities have been targeted and marginalized just based off of whether or not a young man can read at a third grade level. They look at these assessments and look at and see where the reading level is of a child in third grade. And based off of the reading competency of that child or those children in those geographic areas, determinations are made on whether or not private institutions are then placed in those communities or surrounding areas. So instead of us investing in higher education or things to assist these young people to become educated or to overcome that educational deficiency that they may be suffering from at that moment, we're instead pushing them towards what is now, as the book says, the new Jim Crow, the new way for us to create free labor, which is through the prison system, or cheap labor through those prison systems. So I think when you look at it at the end of the day, as we as Black people, or people that are in leadership positions, you have to say, how does this impact the African American and overall general community that are underserved? How does it impact those of us that may not have the political know-it-all or the voices to speak on our behalf? And I think that mayors specifically, who represent those cities that are often targeted, are now beginning to be a voice and a beacon of light. I am a strong believer, and so are the leadership of our mayors of our organization, that you have an elected official, you have the term politician, and then you have public servant. And when you look at the enormous amount of African American and Latino, Black and brown men and women that are incarcerated versus others of other ethnic races, you have to address that social norm. And you have to understand that it is, and I know you, as you said, we don't want to stick on systemic racism, but you have to say, how can we assist in correcting that?
Vanessa, I have an experience where we worked on, many experiences, but one in particular. We worked on the Rockefeller drug laws in New York State. And it was, if I have anything that I can say that I accomplished that was worthwhile, it was this effort that we got all the artists and others. Dr. Ben Chavis really made this happen with me, along with then, I don't know what Andrew Cuomo's role was, but he might have been the HUD secretary or might not have been yet the HUD secretary, but he was there. Mayor Bill de Blasio was a councilman. And we all, along with, we got politicians like Hillary Clinton, and we got, people like Reverend Sharpton Jackson. We got them all to show up. But who really showed up was the hip hop community, Jay-Z's and every rapper you could think of. And we had this big rally, a couple 100,000 people. And people got arrested and made national news. And then the governor, we all went in a room at the state legislature, and we decided on a shift in that deal. 10,000 Black men came out of jail. The prison industrial complex had 94.5% of the people in jail for long periods of time for nonviolent crime, drug-related crime, nonviolent. That's just our reality. So that's what I learned about the prison industrial complex. And so today is a landmark thing for me, because I think if you change that, that does not pay per prisoner, for one, and that prisoners will not be serving corporations for cheap, then that will really help us to end this systemic racist policy, programs, businesses that have been hounding our community.
Well, and Russell, the other
it's a little long-winded, I'm sorry. It's just a subject I'm passionate about. I'm sorry I talk so much, but I just want to share my thoughts on it.
I'm in complete agreement with you. I just wanted to share with you, because as an entrepreneur myself, the other side of that story, in my opinion, my personal opinion, is that, I'm from Las Vegas, Nevada, and I remember the late 80s and early 90s, and how many of my classmates and their brothers and sisters, went away, and some of them are just now coming home. And we're talking about marijuana. Some people were given, long, extensive times and sentences for the selling of what is now legal. So in my opinion, I think that there's the other issue that we really need to look at and address as we talk about just some of these disparities and how they impact our communities is that, you have so many of these young people that were incarcerated for long extended amounts of time for, as you said, nonviolent crimes. And now that crime that they were incarcerated for is deemed legal, and it is $1 billion industry that we don't own. Exactly, we don't own and have very little participation in. So that is another issue that I think that I personally think, as you speak of this, is that there's the old saying, follow the money. You follow the money and you see where people are making money and how they're making money off of you. You have to then understand and find a way to be an advocate to ensure that those of us that are the least of us are not then being the victims of the decisions that are being made.
Well, look, I absolutely agree that, the business of marijuana now without black participation it's almost criminal in and of itself. And the people that went away and the prisons that house them, it is another crime at the root of it that I didn't even speak of is the reason marijuana became illegal because they wanted to target people of color. The reason heroin became illegal is because they wanted to target the Chinese. The reason, this system has at every turn has put a roadblock for us and it's figured out a way to undermine us. And I think, as we're shifting just a bit and at least people are waking up, there's a couple of thoughts that come through my head. One is the insensitivity of those who could be in a good position to help us. We still have a huge, I don't know if it's a bridge to build. I get friends who say, that half the country still supports a lot of the old policies and ways, and they think differently. You can't demonize them for thinking differently. But when you see the blatant racism, and we're trying to fight a system that is abusive to us just for our color, and there's no real excuse to kind of, it's hard to build a bridge without truth. And so this conversation about whether we should be impeaching or publicly punishing, the leadership of these causes need to be publicly discussed, published, shamed. We should put the cat back in the bag. Many people are now speaking boldly about their racist views. Many people are free, enabled, empowered to become what we didn't have in America publicly. People are hiding. And after you hide something, after a while, it kind of disappears. They have lit a spark and they've watered the seeds of racism in a way that our challenges in front of us, even though we have this progressive agenda, even though we're going to get some of this legislation passed, you see how easily Trump was able to roll back what we did to the prison industrial complex. Finally, Obama did something at the end of his term. And I remember having the conversation with Attorney General Holder after Justin Bieber and after Kim Kardashian tweeted about the new Jim Crow. And then they called and they said, we're going to issue an executive order and make first-time offenders treated differently under the new federal guidelines. But that was short-lived. It was the end of his term, and then it was reversed by Jeff Sessions immediately. So we're changing the system. We want it to stay changed, right? But we have to examine the root of these problems, and it is the racism, I think. Can you speak a little bit about racism, Vanessa, and what you see coming?
Yeah, we could speak about racism, but one of the things that just came to mind as you were speaking, Russell, is that what we have to understand is that the Voting Rights Act, we as a country, we go into other nations and we deem them nations to not be a nation of democracy if you're not allowed the right to vote. So when you look at the Voters' Rights Act and you look at the short amount of time, that we're a little over 50 years past, the Voters' Rights Act and the amendment being signed and those of us having a right to vote, you have to look at the fact that then we as African Americans and some women and others that are lumped into that group were literally just becoming citizens shortly into the early 70s. We were just gaining our freedom. And so when you look at this from a historical stance, I think about our mayor, Mayor Perkins in Selma, Alabama. He was the first African-American elected to be mayor in the city of Selma, Alabama. And I remember Mayor Perkins having his first meeting with his staff. And there was a lot of contention because of the fact that there was the old guard and the new guard. And he's a consensus builder. And he shared how when he walked in the room, he said, well, you know, how many of you were a part and were here? Because he was talking about the rich history of the city. And he said, how many of you were present on the day of Bloody Sunday? And the hands went up. And when the hands went up, it surprised him to see how much of the leadership, both white and black, were present. So what I'm saying to you, when we look at, and you were talking about the lids, when you look at the short amount of time that has passed, since a lot of these things, and these transgressions and the things that King and Medgar Evers and others have fought for were going on and existing. When you look at that, it gives you enough time to be a senator, president of the United States, a mayor, a congressional leader. You know, these people were given enough time to now just hold higher positions. And just because they have a higher position doesn't mean the position of their heart has changed. So what we really have is a heart condition issue. And we have to look at what is the heart and the condition of the hearts of our leaders looking like. And so we as a nation have to examine our heart. Or we have to examine our mind and our consciousness and what are we thinking like? And what is the good that we want this next generation to walk and move in? So versus us thinking solely on, you know, the implications of racism, because we, as African Americans, we can speak of that.
I'm thinking about the bridge building process, and people are telling me that they feel that, like some Republicans say, but that how do we bring that 70 million people, or maybe 20 million or 30 million? I think, and I'm going to say this and I'm throw it back out and let you continue your thought process. If you drag Trump's face across the cement and then hang him, people will say it's unacceptable. Racism, I mean, I understand policy, and I understand that some people may feel empowered or things are being taken from them, but haven't really identified it. But blatant racism and support and empowering blatant racist is a very dangerous thing. And there's no way to build a bridge with people who are outwardly expressing these and encouraging others, because that freedom gets out the bag. This freedom to exist, it gets out the bag. And then what happened in Rwanda, what happened in Nazi Germany, what happened in the Western, you know, it happens very quickly and very difficult to clean people's hearts, but it's easy to dirty it. It takes a long time. It took a long time for Nazi Germany many people in Nazi Germany to even understand what they participated in. It takes look how long America has not come to a reckoning of what they've done to black people. So when you slide backwards one step, it takes 4 or 5 steps to get back. And I'm just bringing that to you. I have a strong opinion. I wanted to share it. I think we should be every Proud Boy, the way we infiltrated all the organizations that fought for our freedom and destroyed them, every Black Panther, even NAACPs, and certainly Nation of Islam and other places, always been informants and spies, and that every terrorist organization need to be infiltrated and destroyed the way they destroyed the freedom organizations.
COINTELPRO.
Yes, that's right.
What they did. And so, Russell, I'm in complete agreement. But I personally believe, and it's just this from, you know, my personal perspective, that if nothing else, this all should have shown African Americans and people of color, one, the strength that's in our unity and in our numbers, and that we are a strong nation of people, that when we come together and organize ourselves in such a way that there's nothing that can be denied of us. And I think that we've always known that, but I think that the recent exercises through the participation in the voting process and us using that right, you know, as Adam Clayton Powell would say, what's in your hand, understanding the significance of that ballot that's in our hand, and then using that power, exercising it. I think that is a huge demonstration, but a small one, when you look at the elements that are impacting people of color, and specifically cities that look like the cities that my mayors tend to become a mayor of. When you look at the blight, when you look at the joblessness, when you look at the morbid, the mortality of the people that are there, when you look at all of these things that are taking places in these Black and brown communities, you have to, and specifically the African American community, you have to then say, stealing from the guy that just went out of office, what makes us great. And when they were, every time they would say "Make America Great Again," I said, "We've been great. Now, why can't we just continue to walk in our greatness, because we helped build this place?" And understanding, now that everyone wants to say, "Oh, the Black community has done so much," the Black community has always done. This is nothing new.
That's for sure.
This is nothing new. We've always been very present. We've always been the backbone of this nation. We've always been a people that have been here and have been proud. We are the one actual citizen of this country that has nowhere else to go, Russell. Everyone else, the Chinese American can say they can go to China. The Italian Americans can say, well, we're going to Italy. Everyone else has a landmass that they can say, that they can pinpoint when they say their heritage, and they can say, well, this is where I'm from, and this is where I can go. But it is the African American, the Black American, that community that has put everything that we've had into this nation, because we really didn't know we had anywhere else we could go. And so when this is all you have, you do the best with what you got. And that's something my grandmother, my great-grandmother, all my elders, my mother, my parents, who are very proud people, has always taught us to do the best with what we have. And that we can do whatever we put our minds to. So Russell, it's not surprising to me. It's not surprising to you and others that have been serving and have been in this community, that the Black community showed up and turned this whole thing around for a nation. Because that's who we've always been.
Okay, I want to get your take on, we've always been present. We've always been here to build and to make America great. And we've always wanted to participate in a fair way, and that's our reality. But I wanted to get your take on the fact that when you look at Black Lives Matter, for instance, and the police reform bill, and we should talk a little bit about the police reform bill, because I have a very strong take on it. I want to hear yours. When you look at these things, you see more white participation. So what we see in this polarized country, we see this an algorithm hell that we live in. We see this separation of people and ideas. For instance, if you are in a progressive box, you have 15 or 16 things you're supposed to believe. We all believe those are the compassionate and right choices to make, and so we get fed more of what we know. And if you somehow believe something's being taken from you, and you get fed more and more of that same stuff. So it's the separation of people is now, as much as it is about race, a lot of it is about ideology, of course, right? And you see now a number, the only way we can survive is if, and not survive, I shouldn't say that, because we could always just not talk about integration at all and try to rebuild our communities. But if we are living in an integrated society and we have pretty much crossed the line, it's hard to go back, and especially with integration destroying the fabric of our economics already, it's hard to live only in isolation. America won't allow it. So if we're going to be integrated, we do see this progressive white community that really showed up for the first time in our history. We've never seen so many whites stand up on our behalf and recognize, in some cases, many have recognized the wrong that's been done Black people, where they may have been insensitive before and didn't think they were racist. They never stood up and thought it was their job to march, to teach their children to march. So we're living in a state that's almost like a setup for a civil war. And I just wanted to get your take on the fact that we, as a country, we're so divided on so many social, political issues and the race issues in the core of what they use to separate us from others who may want goodwill for everyone. may want goodwill, not for everyone. They use race to separate us, and I think promote an ignorant, a less than sophisticated view of how they're going to get ahead when they start to point fingers, and that's what they've done. The system has done. That,
Well, I think that I'm unique in this way. I always make reference to the fact that I'm from Las Vegas, and I do it for a reason. The West Coast is just a different mentality. It really wasn't until I moved and relocated to Atlanta that I really felt the level of racism that I encountered. And so when we speak about racism and what we face here in the United States and other areas of our communities, I have to say to you, Russell, it wasn't really until my adulthood that I really had an opportunity to see it head on. I read about it. So therefore, it wasn't until I came to Atlanta that I began to see the true separation of community, and that I had blinders on, even in my own community, about the difference of West Las Vegas versus the development of the city of Las Vegas, and how you could see just the economic shift the minute you cross the railroad tracks. And so these are all things that a young Vanessa didn't understand, that those were signs of economic, a lack of economic empowerment for a specific group of people that also participated and had to be bused and drive into those worker, those casinos to be the maids and the dishwashers and the cooks and the chefs, but they were not able to fully benefit from the wealth that was being created in that city. And to me, Russell, that's what this is all about at this point for me. And I know that may not go on the line with what public servants and services are looking at, but we're speaking about my personal view. And my personal view is about the level of quality of life that each person is able to provide for their children and the next generation. It's about opportunity. It's about every man, woman, and child having an equal opportunity. And until we all are given an equal opportunity, until those playing fields are actually equal, then I believe that we still have a problem, and that's really what it boils down to me. Because I believe that with what we're seeing at this point, Russell, my reality, and maybe a little different than others, I am very much aware of the differences that are caused between race issues. But what I'm even more so aware of is what's happening with class issues. And so what I see what's taking place on a class and social economic status is more, it seems as though we have more work.
but Vanessa, we have to go back to, let me say this. I agree with you about the economic disadvantages we have, but those disadvantages are based in race. Again, it is still the white supremacy, the burden. Like I said, everything is under this tent. This is the underlying problem, is white supremacy. So it's an ongoing, and all of those little things, they're not little. Economic disadvantage, the environmental racism, we living in food deserts. I could go on. There's so many things that happen to people of color because they just said, well, put it over there. The water. You can't do that to white people. You can, maybe very poor. It is a class issue but we are disproportionately poor. So every time somebody does something, whether they raise the minimum wage, whether they create some kind of program for underserved communities, so we can fight for all the communities in America, which a lot of times we do because it benefits us, or we can fight specifically, and I think a lot of the work is specifically about people of color because there are things that really are targeting people of color, not just underserved communities where we get the biggest brunt of it.
Russell, but I guess I'm struggling somewhat with the conversation, and I'm going to tell you why. Because my personal ideology is just different. I believe personally that we as African Americans have to look to ourselves to be the ones and the master of our own fate. I believe that if we continue to only look to others to help solve the problems that we face, then we're still going to have the same problems. I think that there is an issue that we have where we have to bring in those that are like-minded and like-spirited, like you said, bridging that that gap and building that bridge, and that compassion and those resources and things of nature, that those who have been touched and are now trying to think more progressively and earnestly about what's going on with a specific demographic of people. However, if that group of people do not understand the significance of their own might, in the words of Marcus Garvey, up, you mighty race, for you can accomplish what you will. If they cannot understand the significance of their own power, their own strength, then it's going to be a repetitive cycle, Russell.
I agree that black empowerment is core, self-empowerment is first. But I was just asking what you felt. But I hear what you say. And I don't look to, and I'm not suggesting that we should, as a community, look to others. I was just asking what you thought of this whole progressive community. Many times I think they're misguided in their work, and many times I think, but I don't begrudge them. I certainly am appreciative of everyone who can see the plight of black communities and then help to change whatever the condition is, right? Someone who says they see environmental racism and they're marching for a shift in the way people are putting resources or the way they're destroying the planet, or those people who show up at the Black Lives Rally, that's useful and appreciative, and it's kind of it's a debt as an American. If you want to right America, you want to perfect the union. I mean, every American should be there. I agree. But without our own self-love and our own self-worth and understanding of it, we're going to struggle always. I get that. I just wanted to know what you thought of the fact that more white people are marching. You turn on CNN and they point to economic disparities based on race or COVID, how it's attacking people of color more. And they generally make that a headline this week, where it wouldn't have been a headline a few weeks ago. So we just see a little bit of a shift, and I wanted to know if that encouraged you any. I know it encouraged some.
It encourages me, Russell, but I think that the shift that we're seeing is a result of people recognizing that they're beautiful and that they're powerful. I think that the shift, what we've seen over the past years is the hate that hate produced. We were, as a group of people, literally taught how to hate one another. We were taught that only one of us could have that position. Only one of us there can only be one Russell Simmons. No one else is taught that, Russell. In every other culture of people, they believe that there could be many Russell Simmons. But we believe that if one Russell rises up out of that concrete, then there can't be any more. We're like, oh man, I can't do it. Russell did it. We're the only group of people that I believe, sit back and aren't able to see just the full essence of the beauty that is in our race. And I say that because I just think that we have sold ourselves short, Russell, and not understanding not just the history of us, but the future of us. And the future of us, to me, is why we are now, looking and doing work that is across the waters, and understanding that we will not allow language and we will not allow water to separate us. These differences were things that weakened us because it made us believe that we as African Americans were here by ourselves. It made the Haitians believe that no one cared. Out of all of the work that Haiti did to help many nations be free, they were penalized for that. And so they feel as though the Haitians would feel as though they're left alone. You have the Afro-Colombians. When we went into the Latin Colombian areas and the Afro-Latino communities, they're feeling as though they're left alone because of the racism that we've seen in the 60s and 70s that are still going on in a lot of these countries for dark-complected Latino men and women that identified themselves as being black. So we as African Americans, I just believe that we are a beacon of light, Russell. And I believe that all that we've overcome through all the atrocities and the tragedies that we've had to face as a nation of people, for us to be here at such a time of this, I believe that there's a reason that God set it up this way. Some people look at everything that we've gone through with slave trade and everything else as though, I had a pastor friend of mine ask me once, Vanessa, well, do you believe that we as Black people are cursed because of everything that we've gone through? And I said, cursed, and the question is, I don't believe that. I believe that God, in all of his magnificentness and his omniscience, knew that we as a people had to be where we are so that we could in turn learn, gain, and be in a position that we can help to empower the countries of which and the nations of which we've come from. And I believe that's the time that we're in. I think that America is blessed to have African American leaders such as, those that we've seen elected to office that can be a beacon of light. And then they're blessed to have African Americans in leadership position in business and industry and sports, because I believe with all my heart that it'll be this great race of people that will continue to be that beacon of light to help this country overcome many of the egregious things that have happened. And I think that a lot of that happens, Russell, when we understand our power and our strength to overcome and to love and to understand what we bring to the table in all of it that we've gained through our history.
Let me add to what you're saying. There is no question that pressure makes a diamond, and it's in all scriptures, the Quran, the Bible, the Torah, the Yoga Sutras, the Bhagavad Gita, the scriptures that I read regularly. It's always over and over again, these experiences are what make us spiritually strong and physically strong as well. But the spirit of the Black community has been mined and polished and raised to a point of consciousness that is, I would say, the collective is more interested in freedom, justice, equality. Not only we know that hurt people, but sometimes hurt people have experience that teach them to be more aware and awake. And that's what we are experiencing now. If you look at America, you look at the underserved Black community where spirituality is so awake. And I don't mean that the church that in some cases suppressed their willingness to fight for their truth and or to know themselves, not with the white Jesus on the wall, but with this real self-love as the core of their spirituality. It is a growth period for us that we see. And we see us as we're coming into power being the spiritual leaders. And we've always, through music and culture and everything that we've given to America, given them spirit and an awakened kind of fine-tuned spirit. But we now, as we're working as a collective, as we're putting people in office, we see our power, we saw a president, and we see pushback, at the same time. But I think that not only do we see ourselves, but the world is seeing us, as you said. You said that they see us as a beacon of light.
So they see us, Russell. They see us, and I think that's a beautiful thing. And I think that to see someone, to fully see them in their beauty, it is a blessing for them to see you, and not see you based off of their own understanding, but see you in all of the beauty that you are. I remember people say, "Well, I don't see any color." Why not? Color's good. You can see color. People will say, "Oh, I don't see color." No, please.
Well, I see people, I honestly, because of our resilience, our strength, our marching, people march with us. There's no question. No one will support us unless we support and love ourselves.
Absolutely.
So I didn't mean to. I was just saying that there is a shift. And even as you get so much pushback, we see, the ending in a prison industrial complex today, a very, very big statement to me. Harriet Tubman showing up on the bill. It's small, and I know a lot of people would say that that's, just tokenism, but I see it as great. And I see it because I'm sure that a lot of people in this country are seeing these shifts and all these executive orders, and they're furious, and they can't, and when they say it's only policy, but they see that something's edging them inside, and it's race more than policy. It's just, what does it matter who's on the dollar bill? And don't they deserve it? And people are just feeling that things are being taken from them. And I think this education process for a whole big percentage of America has got to be really fine-tuned how we do it. You know, yes, of course, the leadership should be destroyed. Yes, the terrorist organization should be destroyed. Yes, the head of this ugly moment in America has to be addressed. But how do we address the rest of America, or do we just move on without them? I think when you get in your corner, get back in their corners, and they talk hate amongst themselves, it's a lot different from being public and marching and holding up, swastikas and so forth. So I think that we're at a very interesting time, and I do know that only reason black people will rise is because black people will rise. I'm not expecting or hoping, or I don't, but when black people rise, people around them get encouraged, right, and get inspired, and they could be, and they are part of the solution. There's no question. But anyway, we could talk forever about this because there's a lot to unpack. But well, listen, Vanessa, we've been, when we finish chopping this up, we'll still have an hour. We want to make it. It's been a while. But if there's anything you think that we should talk about, if your work in Africa.
Russell, I think there's a lot to be discussed with the work in Africa. I think the work that we're doing with our conferences in Africa, the work that we're doing around the mayors, the 400 Forward, exactly. And then, Russell, versus philosophy, I like, and I think that's why I'm struggling a little, because I'm more, I'm a developer by nature. I'm a person who builds. So I'm going to think of this from my philosophy. It's going to be more of a sense of, how do we put boots on the ground? How do we build houses? When I go in a neighborhood and I see a neighborhood, I'm coming from an economic and development background. That's really what my background is. So when I go into a city, I'm not going to see a city as dilapidated. I'm going to see it for all its potential. And I think that that's how we have to look at the African American community right now. We're now seeing all of our potential. We're seeing everything that we thought we could be, and everything that we have been in the past, and everything greater that we can be in the future. Every single time we've shown our brilliance, our light was shut off. You look at what took place, in Oklahoma. You look at what took place, in North Carolina. You look at what took place with the black banking institutions. You look at what took place, how much we lost as a race of people. And people talk about integration and how much integration was good for us. But what they forget as we celebrate, they say this, Russell.
Of course
but they forget. King's conversation was never about integration. It was an empowerment conversation. He came to the conversation speaking about empowerment. And they made a shift on him and made him begin to speak about integration. But the conversation that King had was one of empowerment. And so those are the things, being the scholar that I am of history. I love to read, Russell. And I love to read about us. I love to read about those of us that are great thinkers. And why did they do it this way? What made them great in my mind? And one of the things that I will say that King did well, as you were just speaking of, he was a consensus builder. He knew how to bring people together that had differences and find a way to find a common thread, something that they can agree about, and focus on what they agreed about versus all of the things that they disagreed about. And so if you can make those type of pragmatic steps forward, that's how those incremental successes, that's how we see a nation move the needle, through those incremental successes. But when I speak to you, and we're having this conversation, and I'm trying to wear these different hats. Okay, well, what would the mayors think, or but what do I fundamentally think? I'm always going to come from a position of empowerment, and it's going to be about the empowerment of a community that I believe that has been wrongly disenfranchised, and when through redlining, through all of the different economic disenfranchisement that have happened from loans and the black businesses and the lack of financial empowerment that's been given to them, to education. When you're looking at what has happened in the past with HBCUs, of which I am a product of, I look at these things, Russell, and for me, there's so many black entertainers, and this is where I guess the Las Vegas in me comes out, because I was blessed to grow up around people that were in the entertainment business, Sammy Davis Jr., Red Fox. These are people that were in the grocery stores. If I was going to the grocery store, you would see Red Fox in the grocery store with you, but we were able to see in Las Vegas how politicians love entertainers and entertainers love politicians. And I think that those two worlds really they have a love for one another in a way where they admire one wants to be the other. So you take someone like yourself that was in the entertainment business, but look how you were able to take your platform and empower other people. And so if we're able to show these athletes, these entertainers, these people of well-means and social media and all of these followers, how to take those platforms and truly use those individuals in a way to leverage them to where messaging and the mindset of a people, the mentality of a people can change, because the social norms are changing. Those are the things that I believe, Russell, that we can do that are incremental successes. And that's why when you were sharing with me what you were doing with Gush Cloud and all of these other things that you're doing, I saw the significance in them, because I understand the importance of the internet, the importance of social media, the importance of taking those influencers and giving them not just a platform, but a message and a mission, so that when they get behind it, they can take a community with them. And so that, to me, Russell, are things that are important to me. It's important to me. It's important.
Vanessa, listen, I got to say to you, what you said about the internet and what we realize about social media and what we see coming in the future is even more, as technology is evolving much quicker than the human brain. That's for sure. Human brain is stagnant, yes, but technology just keeps going forward. And it's becoming more and more where people get not only the news, but their understanding of how to interpret the news. And then they get more of the same kind of understanding over and over. I call it algorithm hell. We must get control of our leaders, because our leaders in social media and our leaders who have this kind of influence in our community have to study and be educated on how they can be useful, because if we don't get a hold to them, all the politicians in the world will never be, and never mind politicians, the activists and those who care about our community, who are working to uplift our people. If our people can't unite with those people in a group effort, we're going to struggle. So we're all going to work. We have a lot to work on, you and I. You and I talk often. We have to talk more often.
Yes.
I have to end this here, but I want to tell you I love you. And people just get a slight taste of who Vanessa is. I just want to speak to them because she is a real soldier for our community and a thinker and a support system that may be underutilized, although she seems, if you think about her accomplishments and the things that she's trying to accomplish today, still, she seems overworked. But maybe you could make her work easier. Anybody who, all of our civil rights activists, I'm going to be talking to, pretty much everybody in our community. A lot of them are more famous and have great resources. And those resources, in some cases, can be used by Vanessa in effective ways that'll make a huge difference. This is why I wanted the world to see you. I was so enamored in selling you because you have so much to offer and have done so much and are doing so much that I didn't speak about one of the things that I think is prominent in your work today. And I told you to get to Africa. We only had 800 hours, so I needed to get this piece in though, because it's very important to me that we share this. The work that you're doing in Africa. You went into Haiti, you went to every other country, you forgot? Because you have 32,000 mayors, lots to think about. But what you're doing in Africa specifically is very important to African Americans today. And could you just give us a little briefing on some of that? Because I want to.
I would love to. Well, one of the things, Russell, that we've been doing as an organization, as I shared with you previously, is organizing the mayors of the different countries. When you look at the continent of Africa, the 54 countries we've now been in and have associations in 39 of those 54. And so that's significant for us. And so in 2008, we began to host conferences on the continent of Africa, just like we would host our leadership conferences of mayors here in the U.S. And we began to allow these conferences to act as a conduit to bring African Americans throughout the diaspora on the continent of Africa to meet with African heads of states and leaders, business persons, ministers of industries that they were interested in doing business in. And so we utilized the mayor's office as a way to open the door for other industries to come in. For example, this upcoming September, we will be hosting our conference, which we've entitled 400 Forward. Everyone has spoken of the significance of the 400-year anniversary, in the fact that, we had 400 years of us coming from Africa to the continent of the to the country of the United States of America, excuse me. And so our organization has coined the phrase 400 Forward in this conference and saying, okay, well, we can look at the history of a race of people in 400 years. But how do we now change the narrative of how we as African Americans and Africans within the diaspora engage with Africa this point forward? And so with that, we're bringing Black-owned business owners, the presidents and industries throughout the HBCUs, the colleges, and so that we can have a twinning that we have in many cities, where we have a twinning of mayors as well as a twinning of colleges and universities, a twinning of businesses, so that you can see people who are in different types of industries being able to find a level of connectivity. So this conference will be our best and our brightest. We have 400.
When is the conference going to be held?
I'm sorry?
When is the conference going to be held again?
The conference will be in the month of September of 2021, this year. And that we're saying it this way because of the fact of COVID. We're working right now with the Republic of Ethiopia and the logistics. And we're also working with those within the African Union. Our organization, which I think is a very significant piece to mention, this past year signed an MOU with the African Union, with APRM, the African Peer Review Mentors Program, which in fact, we have now gone into a partnership to utilize the Conference of Black Mayors as the entity to provide technical assistance and training to local.
You have all this online?
I'm sorry?
This is all online.
This is all online.
Could you give us, I want you to give us the links to some of the different work that you're doing, and we want to highlight here. Let me say this to you. The reason I had you on here is because I wanted to highlight your brilliance and what, and so people see you as a resource, and people see you as a fundable alternative to all of the problems that we have in our community, as a person who could be helpful in many instances, and who was already helpful in so many that they couldn't count. I couldn't capture all of you in this little over an hour, but I can certainly highlight some things. This work that you're doing, 400 Forward, I've heard about it long before you even told me about it. It's spreading throughout U.S., and many people have already traveled to Africa on this 400 Forward program. And COVID kind of interrupted us a bit. I was on my way, in fact. So this is one of the many, many things you're doing, but I wanted to make sure that we included that. And I said, let's talk about Africa. I didn't think about 400 Forward because there's so much you're doing there. But I said, let's go to Africa. You said, but what about the work we're doing in Haiti, which is so, so important? What about the work we're doing? And all of that work is so important. So this, for me, sharing you and your brilliance was the purpose of this discussion. And the details are available for everybody who wants to dig deeper. And we can also come back and talk more specific about any initiative you have that will benefit our people. I'm always here for you. I love you. And I love you too. Thank you so much.
Such a good friend.
Oh, I love you. Thank you. So in conclusion, I wanted to say this because I knew that I could never cover all of the brilliance of this woman, or certainly not the work. I wanted you to get a taste of her brilliance. I want you to get an understanding of how much work she's done and is doing for our communities around the globe. And I wanted you to know that she's a great resource to the African American and to the entire world, the whole African American community and the human family. She is a great, great resource. So, Vanessa Williams, we didn't cover half of what you do. I hope that people will delve into all she is and research some of the programs and ideas that she has, and what work she's done on these programs and in these ideas. So that you'll understand how best to utilize her for those who are listening and who have an interest in serving your communities. Look into what she's doing in Africa. Look into what she's doing with the mayors here in America. Look into how you can be useful to her as she serves us all. Thank you so much, and namaste.